So today I'm sat down with Gideon Powell, and today we are going to expose who we believe could be the most underrated economist around the world. And he's actually the first economist to ever merge money and energy. And I think to set the stage for this discussion and this really critical deep dive we're going to take into the realm of energy is to maybe actually talk about the people who are diametrically opposed to this economist that we're going to be discussing today. And that is actually the Malthusian cult, who are trying to curb our energy usage around the world today. So Gideon, firstly, welcome to the podcast. And let's maybe start off by explaining what is Malthusianism and why it is ruining our world today.
Well, no, thank you for having me on. We don't have near enough time to unpack everything about Malthusian ideology, but I think this mental model for the Malthusian idea is that humans are growing and just generally these resources of the world and the solar system are limited, and that we need to use government force or other forms of control to restrict human freedom, human choice, because we simply do not have an abundance, an infinite amount of supplies or resources, oil, copper, gold, energy. These are scarce things. And so, from a Malthusian perspective, you assume that things are scarce, so which leads you to making other decisions which constrict human freedom and human choice. And so these are topics that we need to be discussing, and the science is never settled. We need to have respectful dialogues on every single mental model and idea to ensure that we have a meritocracy and the best ideas win out.
Would 100% agree with that. Meritocracy is something we really do need in today's world when we're essentially ran by these 80 and 90-year-old geriatrics. I think that's a nice way to put it. I think I could use a lot more hostile framing than that. But Gideon, I want to talk a little bit more about who you think is the most underrated economist, Julian Simon, because before I just read your recent article, I'd never heard of this man before. So I'm sure myself and the listeners would love to learn a little bit more about this man.
Yeah, I think Julian Simon's work, I architect every single investment I make now through the lens of his work. So he wrote a book called The Ultimate Resource. And I don't know if I should spoil what The Ultimate Resource is, but he really took scarcity events, stressful things, and really dug into the nuances and tried to have an elevated understanding of when something occurs, how do humans respond, and what has worked well and what hasn't. And I think when people say we're running out of oil, they're largely operating under the idea that humans can't innovate. And so really what I loved about Julian Simon's work is he merged economics with physics. And really in my article, what's funny is that was a collaborative effort. My wife was the one who coined that phrase and I think it's one of the most important things of merging physics with economics, because economics, are a huge part of long-term value creation and how do we think about things. And so really his work in connecting these two allows you to take a bigger picture and study history, which allows us to think about the future. We can't connect the dots of the future, but we can build them. And so what Julian Simon unequivocally stated is that we will never, and I support this, and many of us do, that we will never run out of economic oil or of oil. There will always be an oil molecule somewhere on this planet. There will always be a copper molecule on this planet. There will always be these resources. Now, the question is, will we run out of economic oil? Will we run out of economic copper? And these are very different questions. And I think this is one of the most powerful things that Julian Simon clarified in his work, is that there's this amazing thing called the rising price signal. And when the price of, let's use the example of oil. When oil, or actually let's use natural gas. When natural gas was going up in price, that that's saying something. It's communicating a intelligence to the market, or knowledge to anyone who can see that price signal. And so when natural gas got high, everyone was freaking out. The headlines were this Malthusian idea: we're running out of natural gas. We weren't running out of natural gas. We have TCFs of known gas. It was, we're running out of economic amounts of natural gas. And so what did humans do? What did Americans do? What did the Texans do? We responded. The oil and gas industry said, I now have a bigger profit motive. And so instead of, this scarcity mindset, they applied an abundance mindset, which is, the price is going up. We have two options: either find more natural gas or apply innovation, or, even to expand it further, compete with natural gas. This was also an economic signal that was sent to the renewables sector: wind, solar, nuclear, geothermal, that, hey, it's now more economically important to compete with natural gas. And so what happened? We had a Cambrian explosion of innovation. Horizontal frosting was, I call it frosting because it's a French word, and fracking's a little hard. So you had frosting that was pioneered, and this unlocked an overabundance of natural gas. So the single largest tax cut in America's history was the horizontal frosting that was pioneered by innovators, by energy entrepreneurs. So the price of natural gas went from $12, $14 down to $2. So what did that do? That unleashed more opportunities, more innovation. And so you had a resurgence of a manufacturing in America. So we were able to repatriate and compete better with Europe, with China, with Russia, by having this repatriation of American manufacturing. And we're really just getting warmed up. And, taking it further, with cheap natural gas, that was able to compete on the margin with coal plants. So you saw coal plants utilization coming down, not from a virtue signaling or a desire to lower CO2. These were after effects of unleashing the human spirit in the realm of energy innovation. So when Julian Simon talks about a price signal, this is the viewpoint. If you look at history, we've never had a scarcity event that couldn't be solved. I talk about whaling. I think it's very clear. Oil companies save the whales. We need to be studying this. So when people talk about, oh, CO2 is rising and we can't solve this without government force, I think that's something we should have a dialogue around, and really informed by historical data. Well, we were running out of whales, and because of, largely you could assume, one, there was an economic incentive to kill the whales. There were subsidies because governments around the world were incentivizing, using subsidies to attract whalers to their communities, to increase economic prosperity. So, energy markets are complex, and Julian Simon was just really the first, the first and the most powerful to study, and he's famous for making a bet with Ehrlich, another economist who self-described with these Malthusian ideas. And so really what Simon was postulating was, in the long term, prices don't rise. In the long term, every single resource goes down in price, every single one. So you're like, oh, well, oil's back up. Yeah, but inflation adjusted, oil is way down. Our margins are compressed. It is not near as profitable industry. It's a more mature industry. So you've seen this in copper, gold, name any resource. I mean, even, before we got into Bitcoin mining, we were studying helium strictly from the principles that Julian Simon communicated. And we saw the price of helium going up. And we said, is anyone out there wildcatting for helium? Because that seems like a pretty critical, resource. And we decided to focus our comparative advantage on Bitcoin mining. But now people are looking for helium, not out of the virtue signaling, but because there's a profit motive. And this is a really important component of sustainability.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing you mentioned there about the price signal. And you mentioned Bitcoin mining. I think now is a great time to get into it, because in your phenomenal article that is going to be coming out in edition 6 of the Bitcoin Times, you actually said something along the lines of, Bitcoin isn't only a digital currency, it is an apex energy load. That's a fascinating quote. I'd love for you to pull that apart for the listeners.
Okay, the genesis of that was I was down at Gulf Coast Power Association, which is one of the largest power conferences. It was in Austin 2 years ago, and I heard someone else say that on a panel. It's this amazing load. We've never had anything like that. So again, I'm very blessed that I've been able to study history and get some, ask a lot of tough questions. But what made America great? What has unleashed economic prosperity can be tied back to principles, the principles of human progress. So when we first started evaluating Bitcoin, it was a fascinating. We didn't even know where to start. But what we began to see is it incorporates all the principles that allowed America to flourish. It incorporates permissionless innovation. So what is that? If you don't have to ask, if you work at a giant company and you've got an idea that's amazing or bad, but it might be great, but you got to go ask 10 people for permission to do it, that idea is not going to take off. So that's what happened in America. When people came here, the old top-down way of Europe was gone. It was, you don't need the permission. That now let's go create value. And so at the same time, if you want to innovate on the Bitcoin code or in the energy space, you don't need anyone's permission to make a profit. So also there's the concept of bottom up. Again, in Europe, when there were problems, you would go to the kings and the aristocracies and say, "Hey, we have a problem, fix it." Well, then you come to America, it's like, there's a problem. There ain't no kings. You got to fix it yourself. So you have this bottom up solution. And so in Bitcoin mining, it has not been led by any single individual, single entity. It is the most pure form of capitalism and competitive market forces we've ever seen. So anybody that has an idea can come in. So that's where this idea of permissionless, bottom up. And then another really interesting one is property rights. So by having property rights, when people came to America, they could buy land. And if they knew they were going to own that, they were more willing to invest in that land. They built farms, they built houses, they built businesses, LLCs, all these other things, the internet. These are all derivatives of property rights. And so with Bitcoin, if you own Bitcoin, you own it. It is, if you hold your own keys and do cold storage. So by having that confidence, then you're also able to invest in the longer term. And then there's the profit motive. If you innovate in the Bitcoin mining space, it is that's where I love this analogy that a guy named Jesse Pelton came up with. It's a decentralized energy venture capital company. So it cares about one thing and one thing only: allocate resources to who can lower the price power the most, and you get to keep more Bitcoin. And so that's where we've just never had this before. So now the hands of innovation are in the people. The hands of who pioneered in the energy markets were massive corporations or independently wealthy people who really weren't motivated to innovate because they've gotten fat and happy and hanging out at the country club. So now anyone, Africa, Latin America, some redneck in East Texas, redneck in West Texas, a sophisticated person down in the Houston scene, anybody can go innovate in the power sector and make money. And so I think that's where Julian Simon's work, is really important to talk about, like, what people are going to do. And we've already seen this in the ERCOT markets, where Bitcoin miners are able to bid into ancillary services cheaper than bigger players, which is benefiting Texas taxpayers, Texas ratepayers. So we're using more power, but we're also able to turn off and then provide an insurance product at a lower cost than anyone else. So there's been legislation to curb that competition, which benefits no one but the incumbents and the cronies. And so that's where you can't stop this. There's just too much at stake. And so the most important thing is the hands of innovation in the energy sector. Energy is the input for everything. It is the gating item on human civilization flourishing. And we now have put the tools to innovate. Satoshi gave us these tools. They're in our hands. They're in your hands. They're in anyone watching this. You can go innovate and you can be financially rewarded for doing it. And this is where it's not going to happen overnight. But the iterative process and the virtuous cycle of creative destruction and mutual benefit, these are just going to play out continuously on the infinite time schedule. And we are just going to continue to lower the price of power by having this power, this tool in our tool chest now.
It's an amazing thing. I'm friends with another Bitcoiner called CK, and he says, well, he doesn't say, he says Bitcoin could be a bigger energy revolution than it is an economic revolution. And I think that really ties into what we're talking about. So you're obviously a massive CEO of an energy company in Texas. And many people outside of America kind of look at a lot of the regulations being passed down from these, ivory tower elites in Washington trying to attack Bitcoin mining and Bitcoin in general with this, 30% tax on top of New York miners. How do you look at the geopolitics of America and Bitcoin? Do you think that America is going to actually welcome Bitcoin like it appears like they are in Texas in terms of Bitcoin mining? Or do you think there'll be more of a battle on our hands and we're going to push Bitcoin offshore?
I think this is something since the first day that I said we're going to commit resources to research Bitcoin, we flagged what are the risks, what are the rewards, and one of the risks was the energy narrative. It uses a lot of power, which is a great thing. And that's where discussing both the cornucopian abundance mindset and the Malthusian perspective, we should discuss both and the pros and the cons and study history of both of these. The absolute biggest risk is that Americans are misled by media narratives that are not informed by data. And so we are not spending a lot of time talking on the interwebs anymore. We're funding research. We're funding multiple different think tanks, multiple different perspectives to have an informed opinion, to work with specifically ERCOT and the leaders and the employees of ERCOT to understand what is this new tool. I have heard from people who absolutely are not Bitcoiners, are power experts with 10, 40 years experience in power markets. And they have said, I heard one guy, I won't name him, but we've always wanted load to do this. We've always wanted load to be flexible. And I don't think you can sing ERCOT's praises enough for the visionaries. I thought it was cool that we did the first demand response with Bitcoin mining and in ERCOT in the world. But what the ERCOT leadership and employees have led is nothing short of revolutionary. When Pat Wood was the PUC chairman, George Bush set a vision. And he said, I want to deregulate the electrical markets. No one was doing that at the time. So what ERCOT implemented was the regulatory framework to, again, give the permissionless innovation back to the hands of the people to innovate. They were decades ahead of anyone. So whereas it was cool, we went to ERCOT and did Bitcoin, what's really cool is people like Pat Wood, George Bush, and all the ERCOT employees who implemented and created the market design to allow for the Bitcoiners and everyone else to flourish. And so the biggest threat is lack of data and making informed opinions around that. But what's beautiful is what I don't want to see happen is we don't have tough conversations about this technology and the mutual benefit it can provide the communities and societies that embrace it. But we just have to look at history. When new technologies come about, they threaten old ways of doing business. These can work in tandem. I mean, the incumbents, the power companies, oil and gas companies, data center companies, they have the capabilities to absolutely come into this industry, but it's not aligned with their vision or their risk profile at this point in time. So and there's also this amazing national security component. I think we can all agree now, is AI important? Everyone just said yes, great. So you have the TSMC chairman who has stated on record that what cryptocurrency miners are doing is advancing AI compute. This was years ago he said this. And why that's interesting, why is that? And again, it goes back to economic principles, because Bitcoiners are motivated by profit. They're on the bleeding edge of chip design. I have some friends at a massive chip company, and the people that believe in Bitcoin love working with the Bitcoin miners because they're willing to test stuff that the larger companies aren't willing to do yet. And so you have Bitcoiners that have not only caught up to, but are looking to push the envelopes on ASIC chip technology, on server OEM capabilities. And at the same time, we're building fabs here. Well, when Bitcoin mining, as it continues to grow, what does that mean? We're going to need more chips. So that means you get to build bigger fabs with higher utilization rates. So we want this tech to be embraced in America. So that's irrespective of your perspective on, Bitcoin doesn't create value. That debate's over because people are buying it. There's clearly an economic need for it, as evidenced by, many of the people who don't live the privileged lives we have here in America. So this conversation of like Bitcoin's a waste, no, like I'm not a big gold guy, but if you have a steel vault and you've got gold in it, that steel doesn't seem like a waste to me. It's protecting something. So that's where this energy dialogue, we need to have tough conversations. But this is going to go global. It's going to play out just like the oil patch. All the oil and gas innovation happens in Texas, then it goes across America, then it goes global. So this is what's going to play out. Everyone is getting training. We're getting training. We're learning. We're improving. ERCOT's learning. Everyone is learning, and this Texas is the playbook. And so once the opportunity begins to diminish in the coming decades, we're going to then our entire industry and new energy entrepreneurs are going to be scouting out locations across America. Where are the others? Well, we've got guys in Indonesia right now already scouting because that's some of the best geothermal in the world. Why hadn't anybody ever drilled a good more geothermal there? Well, probably because when you drill it, who the hell is going to buy the power? Boom, Bitcoin miner. So this isn't just like, oh, we're going to get a little bit better. We're going to iterate, and it's going to be this flywheel. So we're already scouting the globe. I mean, this is Wildcat 101. You can't get the grease without the lease. So we've got to have boots on the ground. Anyone who's interested can compete too. This is what's awesome. Nation states that welcome this new technology, send a signal to the market, invite entrepreneurs to lower the cost, to be incentivized to lower the cost of power for your communities, and structure mutually beneficial regulatory frameworks that give entrepreneurs the long-term incentive to stick around and invest in the community.
So I hope you guys are enjoying this discussion about Gideon Powell's most recent essay that is being dropped in the 6th edition of the Bitcoin Times. I do have a little bit of good news for you guys. The Bitcoin Times is running a 7-week, 7-author, 70,000 Satoshi giveaway. And to celebrate the 2nd week of the Bitcoin Times launch, today is a special day because the Bitcoin Times is releasing Gideon's full essay online for free at the description down below. But if you wanted to get that essay alongside 6 others in a timeless Bitcoin collector's magazine with authors such as Marty Bent, Alex Svetsky, Harry Sudak, as well as a number of other great names, you can take advantage of the Bitcoin Times week 2 discount. And that is actually a 60,000 Satoshi discount on anything that you want to buy on the Bitcoin Times website if you use a promo code Ingenuity. So take advantage of that one while it lasts. There are only 10 of those discount codes being released every single week in the 7-week launch that the Bitcoin Times is running. So get your hands on one of those before they are all used. Alex just tapped me on the shoulder earlier today and actually told me 3 of those puppies have already been used. So I don't know how many are gone by the time this video is out there, but I hope you take advantage of it. And with all that said, let's get back into this chat with Gideon Powell. Yeah, I think the flywheel of innovation that Bitcoin mining is going to create, it's going to be pretty interesting to sit back and watch over the next 5 years. Gideon, I'd like to quickly learn a little bit more about you and your rabbit hole journey, though, because you're obviously big in the energy space, and a lot of the energy propaganda of the past 5 or 10 years has been Bitcoin wasted too much energy. So I'd love to know how you cut through all of that propaganda and actually found Bitcoin.
I've been listening. I think a lot of us are talking past each other. So I'm very blessed. Somebody, elevated the concept of we've got to listen to understand. And so really what got me into Bitcoin was people said there's a problem with CO2. I hadn't studied it, so I didn't formulate an opinion on that. I just operated under the framework CO2 is a problem. Okay. Well, knowing that, what do we do about it? Raise taxes, give more money to the government? Like, I don't know. I'm not going to study that opportunity, but somebody else wants to go do that. Great. But what we saw was the largest buyers of CO2 were oil companies. And by putting CO2 in the ground of certain oil fields, you can produce more oil at a net CO2 rate. So I thought that was just fascinating to me because all my friends and a lot of my associates in the oil, they had their tribalist hats on, said, "Oh, we don't want to invest in that. That's not our thing. We're drilling wells." And then, I have a lot of friends in the renewable Silicon Valley who this is a real concern there. CO2 is a very big concern. And what I heard them saying is they're not going to invest in anything that advances the continued use of hydrocarbons, even if it was in America where we have extremely higher environmental safeguards in place. So that was interesting. So I saw a market need of, great, we can think long term. Let's find opportunities that are uniting. How do we work with not what separates us, what unites us? So making money, putting CO2 in the ground sounds like a uniting topic. And so that's where I've begun to separate. I have separated the dialogue. There is a dialogue around CO2 and, its continued proliferation and the unintended consequences around that. That's one dialogue. Separately is energy use. Energy use is a beautiful thing. I love it. You love it. Every single person listening to this loves their energy use. And you want to find out if someone doesn't, go cut their power to the AC. Everybody loves energy. And it comes from such a place of privilege, we can even talk about energy use. So energy poverty is an extremely real deal. And the vast majority of the world do not have reliable and affordable power. So we can't have a conversation, a productive conversation around, lowering energy use at all. We need more energy. This is a fact. We need, like, India, China, Russia, you name any place, that's an adversary to us, they're dealing with the same problem, that we all need more reliable and affordable energy. Grids in America, they are having issues. More wind and solar, that has positive externalities, but also there are negative unintended consequences. Grids had control of the generation in times past. That is not the case anymore. So if you're losing control of the gen, you need grids to balance. So what are the tools? What are the options that we have in our tool chest to balance the grids? And so I think one of the most powerful things that I was able to internalize is separating the conversations on emissions and energy use. These are different things in different bucket that require the same application of principles and rigorous data, but how we go about effectuating what's best for the community the science is unsettled on how to create incentives to create the most value for the world, and the community is a part of that.
That's what we're here for, creating more value for the world. Gideon, I want to be respectful of your time. I'd like to thank you for the phenomenal article you have written for the 6th edition of the Bitcoin Times. When that puppy comes out and when the Bitcoiners read it, I'm sure they're going to have a bunch of questions for you. So where can the people find you online, and what are you doing these days?
I'm a prolific meme poster on LinkedIn, so I prefer to engage in the LinkedIn medium. I'm very, there's just we need to have more dialogues. I prefer LinkedIn because there's a lot of businessy stuff on there. At the end of the day, you can also reach me on Twitter. I'm Gideon Powell, but LinkedIn and Twitter are where I do, interact. And again, I'm busy listening. We all should be embracing, people with different opinions. And so I want to be engaging with respectful dialogues on those who have different opinion. And so if anyone has perspectives that you think are important, let's voice those. And I appreciate you having me on. And yeah, I'd love to hear other perspectives so we can, respectfully engage those with different viewpoints and challenge ourselves and be uncomfortable, because that's how we grow and, we create more long-term value in society. So again, thank you for having me on.
Thanks for coming, and thanks for fighting the good fight on LinkedIn. I'm not on there personally. I've been meaning to. So good on you for getting over there and spreading the Bitcoin gospel on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your time, Gideon. It was a blast.
Yep. Thank you.
So that's my chat with the one and the only Gideon Powell. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of that one. And remember, you better be quick. If you want to use that special 60,000 Satoshi discount code, use the code word ingenuity when you're buying anything on the Bitcoin Times shop. And if you want to learn a little bit more about energy money, you can check out the video that we recorded where we uncovered Nikola Tesla's 1899 prediction of energy money and Bitcoin. You can find a link to that video right there. And with all that said, I hope you enjoyed this one, and I will see you all in the next one.